Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Full Tilt Drift. Today we've got a couple projects to work on, both on the engine for the Nova and on the 240 drift car. So we're going to be modifying the lower radiator support bracket for the drift car so that we can fit the radiator further forward and thus fit a bigger fan in there. And for the engine on the Nova, we're going to be cleaning it up on the stand before we go to throw it in the car. So first, let me introduce the Nova project to you guys, because I haven't talked about that with you yet. So almost a year ago now, I picked up a 72 Nova. The plan with it was to do a V8 swap and make the thing a daily driver, and that still is the plan. But because I was lagging on finding a motor for it, it just kind of sat around while I was finishing up the drift car. Now that the drift car is pretty much done and ready to go to the track, I'm ready to get my daily project on the road. So to remedy that problem, my plan was to put a newer Chevy V8 in there and a manual transmission swap. And this is the Nova it's going in. So right now this is the inline 6 automatic transmission. So I really don't have a problem with these straight 6 Chevy engines, but this engine is fighting me. So it's coming out and a V8's going in. Plus, I wanted a classic car so that I could do burnouts and rip around town, and this straight 6 is not doing that. And to do that, I picked up this LT1 Chevy V8. So this is out of a 93 Firebird. Came with the harness, ECU, all the accessories on the motor and everything. The problem is I won't need all of this junk on the motor, so I'm in the process of cleaning it up. So we've already got the exhaust manifolds off of the thing, we've got a box full of smog equipment that we already took off to clean the motor up, and we've got some of the AC parts over here because we're not going to run the AC right off the bat, although long term it is the plan. So today we're going to be removing the stock oil cooler on the LT1, and you may be asking, if it has a stock oil cooler, why would you be removing it? So this is the oil filter location on the LT1 engine there on the back, and these lines right here run to the radiator and to the water pump to pump coolant through a very small heat exchanger element inside this housing right here. But this cooler is known to get clogged up in lower oil pressure, so we're going to remove it before we even put it in the car to clean things up and keep the engine running better. So what we're going to be doing is removing the filter, removing these lines and this housing, and this filter should be able to screw on right up there. So we're going to simplify this mess by taking the whole cooler out. Since we're not going to be using a radiator with that bottom outlet, that hose can just go, and we're just going to cap the water pump off for the other hose, which should be fine. I couldn't figure out how to get this thing out, and it turned out that the center bolt, the part that the oil filter actually spins onto, was the part that I needed to loosen up to get this thing to drop out. So before I started deleting this oil cooler, I looked up how to remove it just to see any problems I was going to have, and it turns out one of them was very correct. So it turns out one of the problems that it listed was these bolts that are too long in there, and they stop you from putting a new oil filter on. So I picked up some replacement bolts, but let me show you the problem. Alright, so there is where the old oil cooler adapter used to go, and if I zoom in, you'll see that this is where the new oil filter screws on, and these two bolts have elongated heads to help center the oil cooler. So we don't need those, and they're actually going to stop a new filter from being put on. So we just need a deep socket to take that bolt right there out, and then we have new bolts to put in. So this is where the oil filter is going to mount now. You can see when you look across it level that those two nubs are sticking out, and they're going to stop the oil filter. So this is our old bolt, and this is the new one that we're going to be using. I got button head bolts, which means it takes an Allen key right here and has a very short head, and you're going to need to buy something with a short head so that the new oil filter fits. If you buy something with a regular size head, it's still going to hit the new oil filter and you'll have to shave down the head. So the new bolts are just a little bit too long because the hardware store only had 1.5 inch and not 1.25 inch bolts. So we're going to throw a nut on there and then shave just about that much off the bolt so that it sits in there nice and doesn't bottom out. So obviously we're going to put a new oil filter on when we put some new oil in it, but I wanted to make sure this one fits first, so now we don't have to worry about it. We can go ahead and put new oil and a new filter in the thing next time, and we got one more thing off the motor to clean it up before we put it in the car. So now it's time for the big project for the day, which is going to be the lower radiator support on the 240. So let me show you what we're going to be doing and why we're doing it. So as most of you know, I have the 5.0 V8 swap out of a Mustang in the 240, and I got this giant Griffin radiator to help cool the 5.0, and when I say giant, I mean it's 3 fingers thick. Well, I took the car out for the first time a couple weeks ago, and we took it out to the desert to go race it around. It was probably about 100 degrees that day, maybe slightly under, and I would only get about 5 laps before the car was so hot that I would have to let it cool down. I don't like driving the car above about 215 or 220 because to me that's danger zone, so I would pull off and I would have to let the car cool down for about 5 minutes. So you can see for this big ass radiator, I got this big ass fan. It's a single 15-inch fan, and it comes with this shroud that spaces it out from the radiator. It's about 1.25 inches back from the radiator, so it definitely has enough space to pull air. This thing definitely feels like it pulls a lot of air, so I think my problem here is that I used this fan with a pre-made shroud, and I'm not covering the core part over here or over here on the radiator. So after measuring where the fan shroud doesn't cover on this side and this side, it's about 20% of the radiator. So obviously if 20 to 25% of the radiator isn't being covered by the fan shroud, that part of the radiator isn't being used when the fan's running. This radiator is rated for a lot more horsepower horsepower than I'm running in this car, so it's almost definitely the airflow through the radiator that's getting me so hot on track days. So to help remedy this problem, I got a big ass fan. So when I bought the 5.0 from the previous owner, he gave me a big box of stuff. Well, one of the parts in the box that he gave me was a big ass fan, and luckily I have it now because that fan turned out to be a 3.8 liter Taurus fan, which is supposed to be one of the best electric fans to put on any car. So this is the big ass fan that I'm talking about, and it's about a 16.5 to 17 inch fan. So it's bigger than the other fan I have, and when you look on this side, you can see that it has more blades. When you look at it from the side, it doesn't look that thick, but when you have to put this in a shroud and space it about an inch away from the radiator, it's pretty thick. In fact, it's even thicker than the shroud that we have on there right now, because the fan motor on that one is smaller than the fan motor on our new fan. So you can see right here where I had to cut away part of the core support. I took about an inch off of it so that we could lean the radiator forwards, and that worked pretty well. These brackets right here we made up to hold the radiator, so that's about where the back of the radiator sits. Sits just about up against the back of this lower radiator support right here. So what we're going to have to do is cut away part of this lower radiator support to move the bottom of the radiator forwards, and then put these brackets in farther up. That'll give us more clearance right here to our water pump, and thus allow us to run the bigger fan. So we just marked out where we want to cut on this bottom support. We're going to go as far down as we can on the back so that we can get the radiator at the same height that it was at. And then we're going to bring it forward about an inch, inch and a quarter, and that should be plenty of room to get our new fan shroud in there. Now that we cut some of the structure of the lower radiator support away, we need to strengthen it. So I took some 2x2 box tubing and cut it in half lengthwise to turn it into an L-shaped angle piece. We're going to use one of the angle pieces and cut some slots out for some things that are already in the way on the car, and then we'll use that as a weld-in support to strengthen the lower radiator support now that we've cut some of the structure away. Alright guys, we got the support piece done. We're just holding it on with a C-clamp. Now we just need to weld this guy on, and the front of our radiator support will be a lot stronger than it was before. Since we took a bunch of the structure out of the back side of it, I wanted to add something to protect it just in case something hits it.